Hello guys, so here with you Anna Tutova, co-founder of Coins Telegram, and we are now in Dubai at Token 2049. And here we have our guest, Viktor Bunin, who is a protocol specialist at Coinbase, and as well he runs his own venture fund, Credibly neutral, and they invest into SaaS companies and as well into some blockchain companies too. So great to have you here, Viktor.
Yeah, lovely to be here.
Can you tell us about your background and how and which year did you get into crypto industry?
Sure. So I was working in consulting after college at a company called EY, and I was there for about 4 years. And while I was consulting in 2017, I learned about Bitcoin, and I kept needing to make the time to read the white paper and understand it, but never made the time for it. And at some point, I asked my buddy to help me just buy some Bitcoin, and so we opened up an account together. And I put $3,000 into Bitcoin, which was all the money that I had in the world at that time. And all of a sudden, I found the motivation to read the white paper. And so that was in 2017, and I started doing crypto stuff later that year. And then in early 2018, I left EY and started doing crypto full time. And so I've been in crypto now for the last 7 years, and I predominantly work on protocols and investing and building and all that kind of stuff.
So how has your journey, crypto journey, been so far through the cycles?
It's been incredible. I think the first bear market you go through is always the hardest, right? Regardless of which one it is. But crypto is always something that made a lot of sense to me. And when I started doing my initial work in 2017 and 2018, I really focused on token design, incentives, protocols, and I realized that it was just deeply interesting to me in a way that nothing has ever been before. And I realized that, hey, I did a double major in economics and psychology in college, and then I did consulting, and I kind of looked back in my life, and I was always very interested in like behavioral economics, like why am I the way that I am? How do I incentivize myself? How do I incentivize other people? And what I found out is that when the role of somebody that specialized in protocols came along, and it's really the specialization in incentive systems, it was just something that spoke to everything of who I am. And so I felt like I already had 10 years of experience doing this stuff by the time I actually started working on crypto. And so through the markets, like a lot of things have changed, obviously. But I think that one thing that's important to focus on is to hone in on like what is it that you're uniquely good at and that you love doing. And for me, that was everything around protocols. And the way that I expanded it over time is that I initially did some like side work of like some consulting, and then I did a little bit more design. And then when I joined Bison in 2019, which was a large validator operator, we were acquired by Coinbase in 2021. There I focused very much on product strategy and roadmap and implementation and just being a builder. And then I built upon being a builder and I became an investor. And so I did angel investing for a while. And then my wife and I, and she's Lisa, COO at Aztec Protocol, which is a privacy layer 2 on Ethereum. So she and I started a fund together called Credibly Neutral. And so over time we've built up from just doing some consulting to building and investing. Now I also do a little bit of advisory to a very small number of projects. And so I just found that you have to keep doubling down and doing what works and continue to add value to the ecosystem.
And what did you see the value of cryptocurrency and blockchain and Bitcoin?
It's a great. I'll tell you a funny story. In 2018, when my wife was my girlfriend at the time, we were already living together and we're sitting on this couch, and the bear market was crashing everything. And she asked me, and she said, "Why are you so into crypto?" And I was like, I actually have no idea. And so I sat there on the couch and I thought about it, and I remembered a memory. So we immigrated from Russia. We never had a lot of money, and so I've been working since I was 14. My first job was refinancing mortgages over the phone. And in early college, I was working at this like really inexpensive store, like across the street from the project. Actually, sorry, I was in the projects technically, called Rainbow. And I was getting also financial aid to go to college. And so I remember I would always give my mom money. And one night after it was like 10 p.m., it was a shift at the store. And so I stopped by the bank and I wanted to withdraw $3,000 to give it to my mom on her birthday. And so I go to the bank and I try to withdraw it, and it says, "You can't withdraw it." It was like, okay, that's weird. So I try again because I know the money's there and I can't withdraw it again. And so they say, "Call this number." So I call the number, I'm talking to Chase, and I said, "Hey, I'm like trying to withdraw $3,000 and it's not letting me." And she was like, "Okay, well, let me check. It seems like your daily withdrawal limit is $2,000. I was like, "Okay, sure, but like I'm on the phone with you now, so just verify whatever you need to check, and I would like my money." And she says, "No, I'm sorry, your daily withdrawal limit is $2,000. And I remember just getting irrationally angry. Like I didn't curse her out or anything, but I just felt such a deep sense of injustice that they have my money and they could just not give it to me, and there's nothing I can do about it. And of course, I took 2,000, and the next day I came back, took another 1,000. I completely forgot about that memory. And then when she asked me, I think that was the moment that my trust in the financial system was really broken, and I realized that they have total control and I have none. And so the idea of having something that you can own and that you can be responsible for, that nobody can stop you, was incredibly powerful, and it's something that I latched onto immediately.
Yeah, I actually remember this story. You mentioned it in your previous interview too, and it's really powerful that only with crypto you can have the full ownership of your assets, of your money.
Yeah. It's like the superhero story. Peter Parker got bit by a radioactive spider, and I just got rugged by a bank.
And can you tell us well about your current activities at Coinbase? What does it mean, your position to be a protocol specialist? What are your day-to-day activities?
Sure. So the best way to think about a protocol specialist, and we came up with the job when I joined Bison back in 2019, but essentially it's kind of like the crypto expert at the crypto company. So my job and my team's job is to understand everything that's happening in the crypto ecosystem, whether it's layer 1s, layer 2s, bridges, DeFi, oracles, whatever. And then we do that research and then operationalize those findings to drive product strategy, roadmap, features, content, legal, pricing, etc. And so we're very much a playmaker in the organization, and we partner very closely with the other teams to help them do their best work. And so as a specific example, we work on a staking roadmap quite a bit. And so we just added support for EigenLayer. And somebody in the team had to go figure out, it's like, okay, what is EigenLayer? Why should we add support for it? How does it work? There's AVSs. Which ones should we do? How should we make those decisions? And so we figure out a lot of that stuff, and then we work very closely with product engineering and so on to implement it. And so I spent a lot of time on staking. I spent a good bit of time on our policy and regulatory efforts. And then as of recently, I've started to spend a good bit of time on Base as well, which is our layer 2 on top of Ethereum.
And how would you compare different layer 1s and layer 2s currently existing on the market? And we see it seems like we already have quite a lot of layer 1s and layer 2s, but still new appear not only by Coinbase, but a lot of others. They have involved still crazy funding rounds, more than 225 million, the recent one, and many others too.
Yeah, I think one good way of looking at it is that crypto very much happens in cycles between application developers and infrastructure developers. And actually, A16Z wrote a great blog post about it, so if you have a chance, go take a look at it. But essentially, the thesis is that the quality and capabilities of an application that you can build at a particular time is going to be limited by what the infrastructure is capable of handling in that moment. And so the applications start growing, they start requiring more resources and better tooling and all that stuff. And then if infrastructure doesn't keep up with it, then at some point the applications will not be able to function to the levels that they want. They won't be able to retain the users that they like. And so then you need another investment in infrastructure. And so when you look at it from that perspective, I don't think anybody looks at the current state of blockchains and it's like, okay, this is the end all be all, this is the most scalability, and this is the most interoperability, this is the most of everything that we could use, and we're good to go, we're done, all right, everybody, pack up your bags and go home, go build something else. Nobody thinks that way. And so from that perspective, what we're seeing is that there's a market reaction to people wanting to continue to invest in infrastructure because everybody recognizes that, one, this isn't the end state. But I think the second part of that, which I think is a little bit of what you're alluding to, is that some people like to do it because it leads to potentially very large outcomes, right? Because some people call it the fat protocol thesis, which is essentially that a lot of value accrues to the layer 1 or layer 2 that things are built on top of. I think that's also true, but I think it's one of those things that tends to correct for itself over time. And at the end of the day, the market, is it might be a voting system in the beginning, but it's a weighing system over the long run. And so all the protocols that came live in 2017 or 2021, the ones that have done really well have continued to stay relevant and continue to attract users, and the ones that haven't, right? And they've kind of fallen off and have continued to decrease not only in their value, but also in the builder communities and the user communities on top of them. And so I don't think it's a bad thing that people are continuing to invest in these things we do out of our fund, out of Credibly Neutral. And I think over time it'll kind of shift as the infrastructure gets better, and then people will focus more on applications and then probably go back. So we'll see how many more cycles of that we have in us.
And are you bullish on any other layer 1s, layer 2s besides Base chain?
I will say I think Base has done a truly incredible job. so we're investors in Celestia, we're investors in Monad, we're investors in a number of projects. I think all of those are obviously extremely exciting, but I think the thing to really pay attention to is how the protocol game has changed over the years. In that, in 2017, like you could just launch, a protocol and like not do any business development, not do any kind of like ecosystem development. You launch and over time you start doing things, right? And that was a strategy that worked before. In 2020 and 21, you launched and you had to have done some business development already, and you have to start growing the ecosystem like really, really quickly. And that's what Polygon has done, that's what Solana has done, that's what made them really successful. And you see in other projects from that time that haven't done as well because they didn't put as much of a focus on the business development angle of it. And I think what's happening right now is that in order to launch a successful protocol, you have to go to market so much more aggressively way before you launch mainnet, and you have to really fight for your right to exist and explain to people like, why is this thing valuable? Why does this thing need to not only be created, but needs to be created by you? And I think Celestia's done a great example of that with the theme around modularity. Right, like modular wasn't a thing 2 years ago. When they started talking about modularity, people laughed at them. They're like, this is dumb, go away, this is a stupid concept. And they really stuck to their guns and memed it into existence, but then everybody kind of came around and was like, wait, this is actually incredibly useful, incredibly interesting, and like adds a lot of value. And so I think rather than being like, hey, which protocols are like the most important ones or doing the best or whatever, I think people should be paying attention to is how do you build a successful protocol so that it actually accomplishes its goals and is not just like, hey, this is a great technology, but nobody's using it. And so I think Celestia's done a great job with that. I think Monad's doing a great job. I think Base has done an incredible job. Optimism is doing really well. Arbitrum is doing well. So, I wish all these builders the best of luck.
And Coinbase is as well custody partner for many companies, as well institutional investors. And we see already this year the adoption of Bitcoin spot ETF in the US. As well, we see approval of Bitcoin and Ethereum spot ETFs in Hong Kong just this week. So how do you generally see the current state of institutional adoption, and how do you see the involvement of institutional adoption of digital assets?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think that the Bitcoin ETFs in the United States was a long time coming, but it's also just the opening salvo. I think on the one hand, when I think about adoption, I think about it's like, okay, can people access the asset? Can people purchase it? And I think that before, if you're an institution and you wanted to go to Coinbase and open up a Coinbase custody account, that's a very different experience from just having access to an ETF that is very, very easy. You can buy through all the traditional rails. And so I think like having that open access is something that is a huge unlock, and we're in the very early innings of beginning to see it. I think one thing to pay attention to is kind of like not only who's participating in it, but how these products are used, like how they're added to existing portfolios. And so in the same way that you might have like a 50-50 between equities and bonds, right, as a proposed allocation, you might have to throw a little bit of crypto in there and just have that be one of the recommended portfolio compositions. And so I know a bunch of the asset managers that work with individuals are doing that kind of stuff. I think the thing that I'm more keen about is how are people actually leveraging crypto from an institutional perspective in order to derive greater value for themselves, their users, and their shareholders. And so I think like tokenization is obviously incredibly important. Like BlackRock recently launched their tokenization effort on Ethereum. I think all that stuff is in the very early innings in that people know that there's a thing there. But I think one of the things that's happening right now is that with most of these efforts, not all of them, but most of them, you have all the challenges of Web 2, right, and TradFi, which is like all the legacy systems and databases and tracking and intermediaries, plus all the challenges of Web 3, which is on-chain and custody and hacking risk and transaction fees and all that stuff. And so right now you kind of have the worst of both worlds. And the thing that people should really be paying attention to is that you're going to have that for a while as people start getting their feet wet and people experiment. But then the thing that we should expect to see over time is that there's going to be a flip where more and more of the legacy infrastructure starts getting phased out or turned off, and the blockchain infrastructure becomes the primary avenue. And so one of the key things there that you'd really want to see from a regulatory perspective is regulators treating a particular asset on TradFi ledgers the same as that same asset on crypto ledgers, right? And so if something is a commodity over here, it should not be a security over here just because the underlying database is different. And so I think having clarity from regulators, but also pushing forward the design space are the two things that I would look forward to the most to really see institutions start to get the true benefits of crypto rather than just experimenting.
And as for regulation side, you mentioned quite a battle with the CSE to get some clear regulations in the US. So can you tell more about that? And do you see any perspectives for the US to adopt any clear guidance with the regulation of crypto and digital assets soon? There was as well released recently like a draft of stablecoin regulation. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, I'm not going to speak on behalf of all of Coinbase, but my personal view is that crypto is the embodiment of American values. I'm an immigrant. I came from Russia, and I know very much what I'm getting in America, and there's nothing more American than crypto. And so from that perspective, we have an incredible opportunity in front of us to really help put America on the right path. And Coinbase, we're not trying to go to some other country and leave the U.S. We're not trying to abandon the fight. I think that we're committed, and we love America, and we firmly believe that both we're working with regulators and policymakers, and also with the legal system, that we can have a really good outcome. And I think that outcome is something that is based on the law and is super well founded. And so from that perspective, I have a lot of hope, and I think all of Coinbase has a lot of hope, and I think we feel pretty confident that we can really make a difference. I think something that I'd love to see more of is, in these policy conversations with policymakers, regulators, you see a lot of the same faces. There are a fairly small number of organizations within crypto that are very active in speaking with those parties to help them get to the right conclusions. And so something I'd love to encourage is, if you're a startup or if you're a builder, just try to find opportunities to meet with regulators, right? Whenever you can. But just help them understand that there are people building incredible things. Help them put a face to the name, and so whether it's regulators, policymakers, legal folks, congressmen, whatever it is, just continue to be out there and be present, and just show them that this industry is fighting for the right thing and that we're all great people.
And how will you compare the regulations around the world, here in the Middle East? We see quite crypto-friendly regulators, and Coinbase as well has some expansion plans here. Or can you make a comparison to Asia, Europe, other jurisdictions?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about the regulatory regimes of different places in order to comment intelligently on it. But I think what I will say is that there is common sense regulation that everybody should adopt, right? And so I think one of the things that's super obvious is, if you're an exchange, you should be KYCing your customers, right? Obviously, you're a centralized institution, you're providing custody. And so there's things that just need to be very clear regardless of the jurisdiction. There's other things that we think have a little bit of back and forth, but we think people should come to consensus on very, very quickly, which are things like stablecoins, right? Stablecoins are a thing that, obviously there's a lot of USD stablecoins, there's Euro stablecoins, and, ones for other countries as well. But that's something that's a super obvious slam dunk for regulators, all over the globe, because there's assets that are being held within, some institution. They're being invested in some way, whether in treasuries or other kind of low risk assets. And so just having some guidance there to make that clear, I would say is I think that it's taking some effort to get to the right answers, but is a super obvious one. And so I think that we want to get to those outcomes in the United States, and that's of course stablecoin bill that you mentioned. We think all countries should get there. And I think once you're there, then you can kind of do the hard work of the other pieces. And so yeah.
And how do you see the current state of crypto market, and how long do you think this bull market will last?
It's hard to say. You and I have been in crypto for the last 7 years, and so we've seen a couple of the trends so far. Part of me is hopeful that this will be a super cycle. Although I shouldn't say that word because it's gonna jinx it. But in a perfect world, what I'd love to see is I'd love to see prices track fundamentals. And I'd love to see crypto add real world utility and benefit to people all over the world. And that is the way in which the price increases and things do well and so on and so forth. I'm not quite sure if we're gonna get that on this bull run. I'm hopeful, but I think fundamentally, trying to time the market or figure out all that stuff is not a game that I play. I think the game that I play is just building great products and investing in teams that are building great products. And I think that the more people do that and make that a core focus, the less the cycle matters, because you start thinking at a 5, 10, 20-year time horizon.
And what are your expectations from Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Bitcoin is by far the most important asset in crypto. I think the halvings have historically been indicative of future growth for the Bitcoin ecosystem. The way that I put it is that people have certain expectations and they can become self-fulfilling prophecies. And so if everybody thinks a number will go up after halving, right? Even if it's not supposed to, maybe it will just go up after halving. But I think that the way to really kind of insulate yourself from that is just try not to think about it too much, try not to focus on number go up or down or whatever it is, and just trying to build. And I think that's one thing that's quite nice about the Bitcoin ecosystem right now, which is that they're super focused on building, whether it's Lightning Network, whether it's the BitVM and the L2s that they're working on. That's the kind of stuff that, or like Runes, for example, they're going live. And so those are the kinds of things that you want to see more of in order to be like, hey, this thing is not only a medium of exchange, but this thing is useful, far beyond that, or it's much cheaper, much faster, et cetera, et cetera.
And what other current trends do you see in this cycle? What type of companies have a good chance to become successful?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way that I put it is I think that we're at that phase now where when I use a crypto product, I don't always know how it works. And I'm fairly technical at this point. And so, when I've used Aave and Uniswap and all, OpenSea, whatever, I deeply understood what was happening behind the scenes, why things were the way they were. And now I'm at the part of my journey and part of using products where I'm like, I don't really know what's happening, And I think that that's what you want to get to, right? And it shouldn't just apply to super crypto natives like you and I. It should really apply to regular people that are coming in and using this stuff for the first time. And so, when I think about what makes a product or a protocol or whatever it is successful these days, the thing that I come back to is how easy is it to get started? How easy it is to use it? How easy is it to be protected against losing your money through a phishing attack or a hack or something like that? And so we're seeing a lot of progress there, whether it's embedded wallet providers such as Privy or Turnkey or Coinbase Wallet as a service, and you see that in some of the design choices that teams are making. Where I think before everybody was kind of very standoffish and they were like, hey, the users are super technical, they'll figure it out and they'll set their parameters and whatever. And now I think people are a little bit more open to being like, hey, here's recommended parameters, recommended settings, or here's a recommended path. You can still change it if you'd like, but we're giving you the a recommendation that you can pretty safely go with. And so I think just focusing on that is something that's going to make a lot of projects much more successful than they would be otherwise.
And can you share maybe some of your altcoin picks? Where do you invest now?
I'm pretty boring. I don't really do a lot of altcoins or basically any. The stuff that I do is I buy a little bit of ETH or a little bit of Bitcoin on a daily or weekly basis, and then I predominantly invest out of the fund that my wife and I run, Credibly Neutral. And from Credibly Neutral, from that perspective, how we try to think about it when tokens are concerned, is we try to think about things, and this is again going to be a boring answer for you, but we really try to look for fundamental, value add protocols. And so there's probably we're investors in Monad, and so maybe there's some meme value in Monad and all that. But we really think about things of how does this change the game and how does it really grow the ecosystem and enable new things to be created. So I'm sorry it's a very boring answer. I'm just a boring person from that perspective.
And how do you see the development of the industry in the next 5 years?
How do I see the next 5 years? I think that I think crypto is going to get a lot more normalized. I think right now, so there's about 500 million people that own crypto around the world, but when you talk about crypto, it's still a little bit of a, I don't know if fringe is the right answer, but yeah, it's not widely accepted. But I think over the next 5 years, and I think the ETFs have a huge role to play in this. We're going to continue to expand not only the number of people, but also the types of people that interact and have crypto, whether it's part of their portfolio, whether it's something that they use, such as Farcaster, or something else. And so I think that's really important. I think the other thing is that we're going to see crypto built more and more into backends. There's a company right now called Spruce that we're very small angels in, but they built signing with Ethereum, so they're doing decentralized identity on Ethereum. But one thing that they're doing is they're actually powering the mobile driver license program in California, right? And so there's like an application, you have a driver license in there, and it's valid in the same way that a physical license is. And so like, you know, they're not using like crypto, right? But they're using elements of crypto on the back end in order to power that. And so I think that we're going to start seeing crypto just like be more and more interwoven into fabric society that like you wouldn't even think about. And so what does it ultimately mean? I think it's just going to become a little bit more boring. I think it's going to become a little bit more normal. And that's decidedly a good thing, right? Because that's the way that you're like, okay, you know, we're not here for the pump and dumps. We're not here for like random nonsense or whatever it is. We're here to change the world and make the world a significantly better place and to increase economic freedom. And I'm particularly excited for the role that Coinbase is going to play in that. You know, because we're pushing people on chain via Base. You know, we have Coinbase Wallet. We're doing everything around like the exchange and, you know, futures and all that stuff. So we have a really exciting opportunity ahead of us for the next 5 years to make crypto boring, but also make it really useful.
Yeah, and in your opinion, what do we need for the mass adoption of crypto?
What do we need for mass adoption of crypto? I mean, we just have to make people's lives better, you know? Like,
maybe user interfaces too.
User interfaces, but I think that, so there's a company, I believe they're based out of Nigeria, if I remember correctly, but they're called Yellow Card. And they essentially serve as, you know, they do remittances, they do like mobile wallet, but they onboard people in Africa, and they said that 95% of people in Africa that onboard come for stablecoins, right? And like they want a place to store their assets. They want to be able to send money back and forth super easily. You know, they're not trying to do DeFi. They're not trying to go and like take a leveraged loan position. They're just trying to live their lives. And stablecoins on applications or protocols with very low fees are the things that make their lives better. And so that's a lot of how I think about it. You know, we have to make people's lives better, and so stablecoins is a super obvious one. Remittances is a super obvious one. I think that within the developed world, it's harder, I think, to see that because so much of the complexity of our traditional financial system is hidden away from people. And so there it takes a little bit more nuance, and so you start targeting some of the periphery use cases first. And so, like, you know, even looking at stablecoins, right? One of the things you target is how do you pay people in other countries, right? How do, you know, if you're distributing funds, if you're distributing aid, right? And we actually saw that with Ukraine, right? There was a lot of fundraising in crypto for Ukrainian national defense. And so like stuff like that you start seeing in developed countries. But like, are people going to be using, you know, a crypto Venmo like in the next 2-3 years instead of Venmo? I don't know, because Venmo is kind of good enough for most people.
Thank you for such exciting conversation.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.